It's time to down tools for a bit. Welcome to the ToolShed, the influential podcast for anyone and everyone involved in the building industry. Here's your host, Mick Hawes.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the ToolShed. That was very unenthusiastic. I normally do a much more enthusiastic, hi, welcome to the ToolShed podcast, but I didn't because I was reading something. But I'm really excited about this conversation. We've got a repeat offender. Angela Heise has been on the podcast. When we talk to her, we'll figure out how long ago it was, but it's well over a year. And I've had a number of conversations with Angela, and she, in my world anyway, I think she is a thought leader. I just love having conversations with her because we talk about all sorts of really cool stuff. And I think it's very helpful stuff as well, because we're talking about leadership skills. We're talking about how our mind works and how we can operate ourselves at a better level. And it's just fun and exciting conversation. So, Angela, welcome to the podcast again. I think you're about our fourth or fifth repeat offender. We don't normally have people coming back onto the podcast, but we had a great conversation last time, and we've had lots of conversations in the interim. I've just been catching up with you before we press the record button about what's been going on with the health, which has been some challenges. I said I'd been to New Zealand and brought COVID back to Hobart after attending a health conference of all things and coming back with COVID. But for the people who perhaps hadn't listened to our previous conversation, can you please give me a little bit of your backstory? I'm just always fascinated as to how people got where they are now, because there's all sorts of strange twists and turns as to how we got here. How did you end up where you are?
Oh God, I mean, this is going to take a little bit.
Have you got time? We got time.
Okay. Well, it started when I was little, and I realized that the things we were doing in my family didn't quite work. You know, it was all about what will other people think. It was never about what makes us happy. It was all about avoiding unhappiness, and I thought we could do better than that. So, to cut a very long story short, I didn't study psychology as I originally wanted, because that was all about rats and statistics. And instead, I studied history and Chinese. Ended up studying in China, in the United States, working in New York, in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, in all sorts of places, and working and ending up being a TV producer in Germany, and then coming to Australia on a holiday, and somebody offered me a job, and I ended up running a holistic health seminar network. And then eventually, to cut another very long story short, I became a trainer and coach, which is something I've been doing now for 27 years. So I focus on leadership and the so-called human skills, you know, all of those things that we need to know, but that nobody formally really teaches us. I mean, it's getting better these days, but we still have a long way to go. So I work with people on listening skills, on emotions, and negotiating boundaries, these kind of things.
I think we're going to talk about all of those things, because they're all so important. And like, let's start with the listening skills, because one of the things that we talk about in Black Belt with builders is that the real key to a successful building business is understanding what your product is. And in my world, their product is how they make their clients feel. It's not the extension, renovation, new house, or that's the commodity. But the real product is how you make your clients feel. So the quality of your customer experience is really the product. And in my world, I think that the best value you can offer anybody, but particularly, you know, a customer, is having them feel like you really understand their problems and their concerns and their priorities. Having them feel understood. It builds trust. It's a great quality experience, because it doesn't happen for many people or any parts of their life in life. So what's your thoughts on that? Because it seems to me that some of the stuff that we're teaching our builders in relation to listening skills is right up there with the best quality therapists, which seems a bit bizarre, you know. What are your thoughts about listening and building rapport and being understood?
Well, let me put it this way. The average person listens for 9 seconds before they give advice. So you can't really gather any information in 9 seconds.
Not really.
So the greatest gift you can give somebody is your attention. Just being fully present and being able to just focus on what's going on. And so I just realized I had forgotten to close the window. So I'm going to do this now because it's diverting my attention and I really don't like that. So we do this thing of, you know, being on the phone at the same time while working on the computer and talking on the phone while eating a sandwich. And we now know that we are not made for multitasking. When we split our attention, half of the information gets lost. And if we do three things, we rarely retain anything. And because we assume that we can all do that, the quality of our relationships has gone down considerably since we've had access to smartphones and computers and all of that, because people assume that they're going to become more efficient using that, when in fact what they're losing is the relationship. So we've become human doings rather than human beings. People don't stop to listen. They only listen in order to respond. Whereas when you really are present with somebody and you're just there for them, what you do is you give this person an opportunity to express themselves, to fulfill a need that we all have, which is one of our core needs, to be heard.
Paying attention and really being a quality listener, I suspect, has a lot to do with your intention with what's going on here. And in the case of a builder talking to their client, or their prospect, so they're not a client yet, the builder is probably talking about themselves or their company or what they'll do or how they are good for the client or what have you. And in my thoughts, it's like, no, don't talk anything about that. Like, let's not talk about that at all. In fact, go into the conversation having no objective at all, and apart from listening with the intent to understand, not to reply, not to offer a solution. What are your thoughts there?
I would say have one intent.
Yeah.
And that is go in with the intent to understand what your client wants and what they need. And start separating out the wants from the needs, because a lot of people will come in and they say, I don't know, they want a white kitchen, you know, but what they really need is something that is clean, that so let's say if I go, and this was mine, I'll just give that as an example. I wanted a white kitchen, but what was really much more important was that the kitchen was connected to the dining room in such a way that I could cook and still interact with guests. So there was a need for connection. There was a need for efficiency. So whether the kitchen eventually turned out to be white or not didn't really matter, because you can paint. Yeah. But if you're listening to, I'm going to sell you the best kitchen, and you're ignoring the need for that, I love cooking and I love having guests and I really enjoy when I can interact with people while I'm cooking, it's going to be a whole different conversation.
Yeah. So how do you get to that situation where you're helping them understand what they need? Because sometimes the people don't know themselves, and I suspect you can position yourself as the white knight by asking enough questions to have them understand really more detail about what they want, and you become the hero. But it's not through talking; it's through listening.
Yes. 2 questions. One is, what's important about that? So when the person says, I'd really like this and that feature, or I'd like this and that, what's important about that?
Yeah.
And when do you have that? What does that give you?
Yeah.
And when you have that, what does that give you? You don't have to turn it into a therapy session, but when you feel that when you feel that the person is staying really superficial, like, oh yeah, now that feels okay, or they start waffling. Start digging deeper.
Yeah.
Or it's not about necessarily about like sticking to a budget is important, but what they get from sticking from to a budget is obviously more important than the budget itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So the key with this is to be a question asker and
Hmm.
listening. And I'd like to go as deep as you would like to go about what really high quality listening is, because I think most of us place so much emphasis on, but you said these were
Hmm.
the exact words you
Yeah.
used to tell me this thing. And then there's an argument. Yeah, but that's not what I meant. So there's a lot more to listening, quality listening, than listening to the words. There's a whole lot more.
Yeah. So we've just frozen.
That's all right.
Okay.
This is live, and that sort of stuff happens in real life.
Okay. All right. So I'm just sorry. That just distracted me. So we were talking about
Listening and not getting distracted by just the words.
yes. What really matters is that you don't have the answers. It's like, don't prefabricate what you want to say in your head and wait for the person to give you the cue so that you can say what you want to say.
Yeah.
Ask a question, stay present, and allow yourself to be surprised. Sometimes people will give you an answer that you don't expect. But if you help the person know where they want to get to, like, again, you're asking question of what is important about that and what do you want, not what do you need. Like, yes, you might like a Ferrari, but what you really need is a car that is reliable and gets you to work.
Mm.
So when you help people from that place of curiosity, and really importantly non-judgment, not non-judgment.
Mm.
When you don't when you don't say, well, that's important to you, I don't get that.
Mm.
No, but you get into that place of, I'm just really here for you and I want you to get the best out of this. So there's an aspect of care that comes with that. And for a lot of times it means you need to park your ego.
Yeah. I remember reading a book by Hugh Mackay many years ago, and it was called "Why Don't People Listen?" And he just used a really wonderful analogy, and I'd love your thoughts on it. And he was basically saying we're all in a cage. In the water, sharks swimming around. Okay.
Lovely metaphor.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great metaphor. But we're all looking through our bars in the cage, and our bars represent our past experiences. So they become our values, our beliefs, and all that sort of stuff. What's right, what's wrong, and we're looking at life through these bars. And then sometimes, in an attempt to understand from somebody else's perspective, we'll come around behind that person to look through their bars. But the only challenge is we're looking through our bars, looking through their bars. So it's a very weird perception of what you can't really get an accurate perception of what they're seeing, because it's filtered through your bars. And so he says the most challenging thing is we have to open the door to our cage and we have to swim into their cage and really experience what it's like for them. I like the metaphor from the perspective that it's sometimes really dangerous to listen to somebody. It feels danger, because if I am to understand from somebody else's perspective, I really have to drop all of my rights and wrongs and values, and I become vulnerable. I potentially can be influenced by this perspective. What are your thoughts on that?
Totally. I do an exercise with people where I get them to step out of themselves and leave themselves behind with all their values, their emotions, their needs, and their concerns and all of that, and literally shake themselves out of themselves, shape shift, whatever metaphor works, and step into an independent observer position. And I put that on the floor. I get people to literally step out and then have a look back at themselves, and then see themselves in relationship with another person, and then notice if they still have any of the judgments or the beliefs or the feelings, and then step back further and further until they're totally detached. And they know that they're really, really detached because the only emotion that stays and the only attitude is curiosity and an aspect of compassion of, like what is going on for these people. And a lot of people do this. What you describe is when you swim from one cage to the next and you look back through their bars. The problem is you still take yourself with you.
Yep.
You still take your values, your beliefs, your emotions with you. Whereas when you step into an observer position and you look at it from that independent, curious place, and then you swim to the other cage or you step into the other position, then it's much easier to look at that from not so filtered viewpoint.
Yes.
Does it mean that what you hear and what you see is actual reality? No, it's still perception, but it's going to be largely separated. You'll be able to separate out your attitudes, your feelings, and your emotions from that. And then you go back and you step back into the observer position and then shake it off again, become really independent again, let go of whatever you've experienced in the other person that you think they think. So you get back into that, what they call the anthropologist from Mars position. So you've got absolutely no idea what's going on. You're just gathering information. Then you step back into yourself. Now, I've done this exercise with, I think, probably over 1,000 people, if not more. And the thing that generally people say to me afterwards is that the way they look at the situation has completely changed. And it is not about being right or being wrong. It's about having more empathy. It's about more curiosity. It's about really wanting to find out what's going on for the other person rather than saying, I know exactly what's going on for them.
Yeah.
And I know how you feel about me. Even the reverse, the double mind read. I don't only know what you're thinking, I also know what you're thinking about me.
We had a really interesting conversation with our black belt members earlier today. And there was a bunch of them that were, I suppose, that they weren't nurturing themselves because they were so focused on helping their team and putting, helping create systems and they were just focused on team, but they'd completely forgot about, looking after themselves. And I know that something that the space you work in is leadership with a lot of organisations. I want you to help us understand how important it is looking after yourself mentally and emotionally is to be a quality leader, because we see it all the time. Like the business owner just does not look after themselves mentally or emotionally. They're stressed out. They're working way long hours. They're not looking after themselves physically either.
Yeah.
And I believe that your example is a big part of leadership.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, leadership starts with self-leadership.
Yes.
If you don't take care of yourself, you can't lead other people. And the fact is, even if you have a rather flat structure where you are, let's say, more on Australian terms with people rather than, let's say, French or, other countries that have a very high authority distance, where you don't really associate with people, you will still be an example to people, and people will look at you from a place of they're role modeling you. So if you don't take care of yourself, you're basically giving people permission to do the same thing. And we know that, for example, nutrition, when you don't eat food that's particularly good for you, if you're eating in front of the computer, you're stressed out. You're in the shark tank, right? The sharks are circling. You're not going to digest your food because your body is going to stop that in order to stay in that fight flight mechanism, because it feels if it's being attacked, it can't use energy to digest food. It can't save a spare energy to repair things. So the immune system shuts down. All of these mechanisms are really useful in short term. They really work well in emergency situations, like when you have to lift a car off other people or when you have to swim away from a shark.
Which
Or
happens all
something
the
like
time.
that. But the problem is we respond to those kind of situations. We respond exactly the same way we respond to the attack of a shark or a car accident when somebody threatens our status or questions our capabilities or our competencies or our status. So it gets processed exactly the same way. So if as a business owner, you're constantly trying to prove yourself, you're working in front of the computer, you are constantly trying to make sure that the people around you are working efficiently, you're wearing all these different hats, and you're eating in front of the computer, or you're not eating at all, or you're eating the wrong foods. What you're doing is you're creating a playground for all sorts of things that are going to, excuse my French, bite you in the bum in the long run.
It's hardly necessary to say, excuse my French, and then say bum.
Yeah, well, because the thing is, 80% of our immune system sits in the gut.
Yeah.
So if we're eating bad food, garbage in, garbage out, we're creating a gut flora that doesn't connect with the brain anymore, because there's a huge connection between the gut and the brain.
Yeah.
Which means you can't think properly anymore.
Yeah.
Eventually, you will find that you're living in that brain fog. You won't be able to sleep properly. Now, none of these things happen overnight. Some of these things take years to develop. But if you are in a leadership position, in any kind of where you have to manage people, you cannot afford to not optimize your well-being and your self-care, because it will come out as hangry, as short-tempered. It will come out as depressed. You won't be able to think. So your ability to have come up with creative solutions, to be innovative, to support people, you won't be able to do that, because your whole focus is on survival.
Yeah. There was a program I watched, I think it was called Hack Your Health, where they're basically saying that same thing. But the lady that was talking about it was sort of saying, we've got two brains, one here and one in the gut, something really, I had a really interesting conversation with my health coach, the one that he and I got COVID when I went to visit him. But I'm in this this little group of business owners, if you like, in the bigger group, and he was having a conversation, and it sort of developed into this conversation about stress, and these people are leaders. They own their own organisations and they're leaders, and part of what he was talking about was when you're in stress, your cortisol levels are high, your insulin levels spike, and it's impossible to burn fat. It's impossible to lose weight, if you like, when you're stressed. And he was sort of talking about these guys who, these guys were saying, oh, yeah, but, I'm not really, there's nothing, I'm not stressed, I'm not worried about anything. Long story short, we found out that what they're dealing with all day, every day, 6-7 days a week, is this stuff that they are just used to, but they are living in stress all the time, and it just seems normal. So their brain, they're telling themselves that I'm not stressed. So how can we identify that? Because I'm sure there's a gazillion builders out there that are living in stress all the time about managing people and getting work, managing the work, paying the bills, all of that sort of stuff, and it's just non-stop. They're managing it, but they think that's normal. What can we do to identify and then potentially fix it? Hey, I'm Mick Hawes from Builders Business Black Belt, and I hope you're enjoying this episode of the ToolShed podcast. I've got something super exciting I want to share with you. We've got a place that's got a whole bunch more free resources to help you with your building business. In fact, there's a whole other podcast that gives you specific training that will help you get more free time, more profit, and more enjoyment from your building business. And it's called, funnily enough, the ToolShed. It's free to join, and it's full of other success-focused builders. And I invite you to join us in the ToolShed, where you can ask me questions and get guidance and support from other successful builders. Just click the link in the description to join, and I'll see you in there. I hope you enjoy the rest of this podcast.
Well, if you want to know the fastest test to find out how stressed you are, go on holidays.
Yeah.
Chances are, if you get sick on the first day, you're really stressed. which happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing that happens is when people finally start to relax, they get sick
Yeah.
because the immune system kicks in and the body goes, oh, finally, I can fix these things that I have been holding on to, that I haven't been doing. It doesn't need to go that far. I mean, if you want to find out how stressed you are, sit somewhere really quiet, like literally give yourself 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and just sit somewhere very quiet without a phone, without any electronic device, without any person near you, and just sit and be. And notice where your thoughts go. And notice how fast your thoughts go. Notice how you're feeling in your body. We have our emotions generally make themselves known as physical sensations as well. So become aware of whether you've got a knot in your stomach. Notice how fast your heart is beating. Notice if you've got like a tight throat, for example, or feel your hands. Sometimes when we really get stressed out, we clench our hands. And when we start relaxing them, it feels really awkward. It's almost like, we have no strength in our hands. Notice whether you can keep your legs still. A lot of people have restless leg syndrome. So their leg just goes up and down the whole time. So notice if that happens. What else is there? There's so many things that can tell you how stressed you are. Notice your breathing. If your breathing is really flat and fast, that means you're in fight flight. So that means your sympathetic nervous system is working overtime. When we're really relaxed and when the gut brain axis works well and the vagus nerve is relaxed, that feeds into all our major organs. When that happens is we breathe deeply and much more slowly. So if you do that for 10, 15 minutes and you just sit there and find out, notice what's going on in your body, notice what you're looking at. Do you turn your head all the time, or can you look at something for a longer period of time? Do you breathe slowly? What are your thoughts doing? How do you feel in your body? Notice the muscle tension, all of these things. It's a really good way to just find out what's going on. And then you can actually relax the muscles. You can breathe more deeply. You can just look at something a little bit longer, and you will find out that will make an immediate impact. And chances are, if it works once, it'll work again. You make it a daily practice. You're showing your body what's possible. You will start finding that maybe it gets a little bit more difficult for a while, but then it'll get better. And the reason I'm saying it gets more difficult is because your body is going to go, I'm not used to this. Let's get back to what I know.
That reminds me of we had a builder's business black belt training day, I don't know, a month or so ago. Couple of months ago, and a bunch of black belt members flew down to Hobart, and we spent a whole day together. One of the things that we were talking about was thinking time, and having an environment where it's a place that you only ever go for a thinking time block of like 40 or 50 minutes. You have a specific chair that you sit in for thinking. Yeah. You never ever sit in it unless you're having a thinking time. A special pad and a special pen that you only ever use for thinking time. And so we were talking about this, and I said, now we're going to do it. And I said, you can go across the road to the park or wherever you want to go. You can stay here if you like, but you got to turn your phone off, at least put it in flight mode so there's no distractions. And if you stay here, there's no talking to other people. It's just being with your own thoughts. And I don't care what you think about. This is just to experience a thinking time session. Yes. So go. I said, you've got 30 minutes. Off you go. And I'm just sitting there at about the 12-minute mark. I'd noticed the majority of people who decided to stay in the room just kept, touching their phone. That was on airplane mode, but they just wanted to see what time it was. And I noticed they'd do it about every 30 seconds for the last 15 minutes of the 30-minute. And I said, got them all back in the room. I said, what was your experience? And they said, I hated it. When is this silence going to end? And it just goes to prove how terrible we are at thinking time and spending that time with our own thoughts, which is so critical. Like, it's so important for us to have that time and to learn Would you say that is a skill, to sit quietly and just allow your thoughts to manifest?
Yeah,
They go where they go.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they do say anything that's, literally anything longer than 15 seconds
Mm,
of maintaining your attention on something is a meditation exercise.
yeah.
And we don't teach people that. We don't teach people to stay present with what's going on, which is why when you said you gave people 30, 45 minutes, I
Yeah.
go, good luck with that one.
Well, it didn't work. I mean, it kind of worked to get the point across that
Yeah,
we need to do it. We've kind of created a structure now for it. So there are
yeah,
questions you can ask yourself at least to get the momentum happening. But the whole purpose of the thinking time is not to come up with solutions or answers.
yeah,
It's just to see
yeah.
where it goes. Wonder,
Well,
basically.
the problem is we're downloading and processing so much information. I mean, we're literally processing the equivalent of 16 movies every single day.
Mm.
I mean, I remember in the 1980s, they did a study, and this was when I was working in Hong Kong, and they had the huge brick phones and fax. That was the only way with which we communicated. There was no email, no internet, nothing like that. And I read a study that said that 100 years prior, people were doing in a year what we were doing in the 80s now in a month.
Mm.
So can you
Wow.
imagine how much that has sped up since then, now with email and 24/7 connectivity and all of that? But our nervous systems haven't adjusted to that. We are not used to we are downloading on one day more information than a farmer would have downloaded 100 years ago in over a year.
Wow.
So that's, because they would they'd stay at home, then they go to the market, they get the latest news, they come home. Now, just as with social media, we're just getting so much information, and a lot of it is not good news. There's a
Mm.
lot of stuff that really creates a lot of aggravation. So we are constantly in that fight flight state. Yeah. So learning to sit still is difficult because we are human doings these days. We're not human
Yeah.
beings.
So what's something we can do? Because you talk to, and I'm surprised that a number of our builders do actually study meditation, or they'll listen to
Mm.
some sort of meditation, and it becomes part of their daily routine.
Mhm.
Sometimes they forget about that and get sucked into the whirlwind again and have to come back to it.
Yeah.
But and part of the feedback is that I'm just not very good at meditation, and it's like, well, it's because you think it's meant to do something. It's it's just meant to be. Like, it doesn't. You
Yeah.
can't do it wrong. So, have you got any suggestions, any ideas as to what the listener can begin to do to start to quiet the mind and just allow it to
Mm.
go where it needs to go on a regular basis?
Well, I highly recommend single tasking. So
Yeah.
focusing on one thing at a time. I
Yes.
remember very much my now ex-husband was going and doing a meditation retreat, and they went for a walk, and then they had dinner, and then they did some calligraphy. So it was a Chinese resort, no, sorry, a temple. And he was saying, "When are we going to start meditating?" And the priest just basically looked at him and said, "We have been. When you walked,
Yeah.
you meditated.
Yeah.
When you ate, you meditated, because eating was done in silence
Yeah.
with complete focus on the food. When you were doing the calligraphy and you were holding the brush and you were doing your character, you were drawing that was meditation. So anything you do in life can be turned into meditation exercise. I have a dance practice that's meditation. It's called five rhythm dancing. It's a movement meditation. You can turn anything, as long as it's mindfully done, into a meditation exercise. You can have a shower and
Mm.
meditate. Brush your teeth, meditate. It's bringing your focus back on what you're doing rather than on what you're thinking. Yeah. So I mean, we're walking heads these days. I mean, I have that here. Look at that. I think I drew that for a client the other day. There you go. This is what
You've,
we look like these
you've
days.
definitely missed your calling as a graphic artist. There's no doubt about
Oh
that.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And so you're saying that, and I'm thinking, there are so many things that are meditative. For me, it's like I've got a rack of guitars over here,
Mm.
and I'll grab a guitar probably 4 or 5, 6 times a day, and it's only for 5, 6 minutes, and just
Hmm.
play it, and
Yeah.
and you're just focused on it, and it's a really good mental and emotional break. And I know that, I play in a little trio, and we only play like once a month or something like that. But I know when I play music and
Yeah.
we're doing, a bracket, I just
Yeah.
don't think of anything other than.
Yeah.
So what's your meditation? What can you do? Is it flicking a lure? Is it fly fishing? Is it
Anything.
skateboarding? Is it, I don't know, just about
Could be
anything.
anything. I have a bubble wand on my deck.
Yeah.
I go out and I blow bubbles and I watch the
Bubbles.
bubbles float away.
Yeah. Yeah.
I I cook. My meditation is prepping food.
Yeah.
I literally cutting and enjoying the texture and the flavors and all of that, tasting obviously. That is my meditation. I
Mm.
love doing that. It's my happy place.
Yeah.
I totally relax when I do that. So if it creates stress for you, if you're playing a musical instrument and you're doing it with the intention of getting really good at it and you're getting frustrated because the goal is to be the
Mm.
next Jimi Hendrix, then it's probably not a meditation
No.
exercise. Then it's a hobby. But
Yeah.
if you're doing it because you really enjoy, the feel and the sounds and all of that, then it's meditation and
Yeah.
then it's mindfulness.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, I
whatever you
think
do,
yeah, that's a really good message. So we don't have to, sit cross-legged with our doing all of this
no,
for meditation. It can be just tying a fly, if you're
yeah,
fly fishing or something like that,
yeah,
In fact, funnily enough, I bought a little racing yacht a little while ago, and I'm doing all of these little. I've taught myself how to splice, there's different types of ropes on the boat,
mhm,
and I'm now just coming up with ideas as to what I can make, and it's just so meditative learning
yeah,
how to create these splices and little inventions, and it's wonderful. So,
yeah.
yeah, it doesn't have to be the woo woo weird, grab a
No,
caftan and hug a tree type thing. It can be
no,
whatever you like. Just
exactly.
focus on one thing. While we're focusing on one thing, I'd love your thoughts, because you said single tasking, and one of my big pet hates is people talking about multitasking as if
Mm,
it's a good thing, because it's just
mm,
not. I mean, I say it's probably the single best way to waste your time, multitasking.
absolutely.
Not,
Yeah.
we can't do it.
No, we're losing so much efficiency when we multitask. I mean, there's a very basic example that you can do, the thing that you can do. If you take a pen and write down 1 to 24, and then write the alphabet A to Z, and now do the same thing again, but this time you write 1A, 2B, and just do that alternating. And just time yourself and see how much longer you're going to take. You're going to be surprised how much
Mm,
longer it takes to write down when you're alternating between two things.
yeah, yeah,
So it's the and it's so important. I mean, if I may take this into another area, it's so important for human relationships. Be it, whether you're working with somebody or whether it's your family and your children. Like how many times do I talk to parents and to people, like again, people at any age, talk to them and say, so when somebody comes up to you and starts talking to you, do you continue with your work? Yeah, I can do both. I can listen to them and talk. And then I do an exercise with them where I do exactly that. I put them in a position where they have somebody sitting in front of them who listens with great attention and great focus, who doesn't say very much other than wow or great or interesting
mm,
or anything like that. And then I give them a signal and they lose interest. And the only thing they do is do this. They lean forward, they pick up their phone, they put it down, they look out of the window, and they go in the meantime, they keep doing interesting. Uh-huh. Yeah,
mm,
oh wow. And there's this whole pretend listening.
yep.
And I get people to do that literally for 3 minutes. And by the end of 3 minutes, people are so frustrated. I have literally, and I do this sometimes with observer positions, somebody sits in observer.
Yep.
People literally start talking to the observer who has nothing to do with the situation because their need to be heard is not
Yeah.
being met.
Yeah.
I have had people leaning forward and going, hey, you're not interested in what I'm saying? People getting aggressive, people standing up, walking away. And when I say to them, this is what happens when you do this with your children, with the people who come to you to talk to you about something that's important to them, for them to be able to do their job, to understand something. And you're going, yeah, no, I'm listening. Yeah, no, keep going while you're doing something else.
Yeah. It's
It's a
hilarious.
question of respect.
Yeah.
And what it does is, you are teaching people that they don't matter.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Too true. We used to do a similar thing in some of the workshops where we'd split the room in half and send half the people out. And I'd say, I want you to go out and I want you to think about one of the most exciting stories that's happened to you in your life, because I want you to come back in and tell it. And then so while they're out there coming up with their story, we clue everybody else, their partners, up in the room and say, for the first minute or so, 2 minutes, I want you to just kind of, like you said, look at your phone, look around, not really engage in what they're saying. And we were talking about body language, and mirroring and matching and things like that. And
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to walk around, and when I go to my table and I pick up the glass and have a drink, that is the signal for you all to sit forward and oh, that's it. But sit and mirror and match their body language, do everything.
Yep.
And then after the exercise, I would ask the individuals who are telling the story, how did you go telling the story? And it was really funny when they'd go, well, I got to this part in the story and I really had them at this point. I thought they were really interested.
Yeah.
But it's, they thought that it was what they were saying that got the people interested or not. And it was all so subconscious. And it just goes to show that people need it. They love it. They don't think about it consciously. It's a real subconscious thing that I feel like I'm listened to, or I feel like I'm not. And it's super important for leadership, running a business, families, any sort of relationship. Last question. This is a new tradition in the podcast. It's a bit of a sort of a left field question. We'll see how you go answering it, but you're only ever allowed to give one piece of advice in the future. What is that? What is that one piece of advice you're going to give? What's the best bit of advice you've got to be able to share?
Everything is perception. Don't take things personally.
Expand on that, because that's brilliant.
Check in with yourself. Notice what your biases are, whether you're coming from, when you're assessing something, whether that's actually something that comes from the past, it's something you're familiar with, or whether it relates actually to the situation. So whether it's current or whether it's historical. So whether it's based on your beliefs and what you get from other people is exactly the same thing. It might be historical, it might be current, but it's not. When we talked about this before, you make somebody feel. You can't really make somebody feel. They will feel something when they're with you, right?
Yes.
But it's not, you're not causing that in that sense. You can't make somebody be something. So when it's perception, somebody will respond to the same thing you say to two different people in completely different ways.
Yes.
One may think it's absolutely hilarious, and the other person will feel like they need to clubber you over the head. And you can't control that.
No.
So don't take it personally. And because it's all perception, and then focus on what is important to you in that situation. What is the best outcome? Remember that the relationship will continue after this conversation. So don't avoid getting into this place of, I'm going to be right. My perception matters, yours doesn't, and I've got the right one. But look at what is really important, and then don't take whatever comes out of this personally. Move forward and just consider that everything is perception. Was that expanded enough?
Yeah, brilliant. So I want to thank you for coming back on to the podcast. it's always so enjoyable having these conversations. To let the listener in on how this happened was we've been chatting on email and said, you asked me a couple of questions, what are we going to talk about? And I said, I'll hit the record button and we'll see what happens. And I think you did an extraordinary job. This was really valuable, really powerful, really valuable stuff. Not just for builders, but I think for anybody. It's just really good life advice. And I think that's what happens when I speak to somebody that has such a depth of knowledge. You know, we don't need to have prepared questions and topics so you can prepare for it. It's just, this is what I know because I am an absolute committed student of this, and I'm continually learning. And you're passionate about it. Like you absolutely believe with a passion, and you want to help people, which is just wonderful. And it's just great having conversations with you. And in this case, we recorded it so other people can listen to it. So thank you very much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. It's always wonderful to talk with you.
So, folks, that is it for this episode of the ToolShed. We're going to put Angela's contact information, the website, in the description. So if you feel that you want to have a conversation or look at having Angela run a session or whatever for your organisation, you'll know where to find her. I'm sure this will not be the last time that we'll have Angela on the podcast, because it's just such fun having these conversations about these really important and valuable topics. So there you have it. I hope it inspired you to start to look after yourself as a leader in your organisation, inspire you to refine your listening skills. And the bottom line is that what we were talking about, I believe, is easier. It makes life easier if you go into the important conversations without any other intention other than to just understand. You don't have to come up with solutions. You don't have to come up with answers. You just be there for that person and have them feel like they've been understood. It's very powerful stuff. So that's it for this episode. As I said, we will be back with another episode of the ToolShed podcast before you know it. I'm Mick Hawes from Builders Business Black Belt. That is all. I'm out. Bye for now.
You've been listening to the ToolShed. If this podcast struck a chord with you, make sure you spread the word by sharing it with your mates in the building industry. We love your help to make the building industry better for everyone involved.